My interest in the use of ICT in schools began in May 1990 with the release of Windows 3.0, which was really the beginning of Windows as we know it today. It's interesting to remember what schools were like back then. I had long discussions with colleagues about whether or not the monitors should be in colour. 256 colours was expensive. Whether we could afford a 256k hard drive on our PCs. And I had many discussions with teachers about whether they should use word processors, and most of them couldn't see the point. I have my typewriter and my Bandmaster sheets. What more do I need? There's been a lot of social change since then, even within schools. Even so, the activities that take place within our classrooms these days are not much different to those that were happening in the mid-1990s. The whole of society has been transformed by the use of ICT, but classrooms remain strangely resistant to these changes. Technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. Kranzberg's first law of technology has stayed and spoken to me over the years. How an ICT policy is implemented in schools, in my view, is really down to power dynamics and the relationship between senior managers and their teachers, and their relationships between teachers and their students. If you look at my blog, you can see I'm beginning to explore some of the implications of this statement. The Department of Education and Ofsted are recognising that the constructive use of generative AI in schools could reduce teacher workload. And that is something which is close to finding the Holy Grail as far as the DFE is concerned. The randomised trial recently reported by the Education Endowment Foundation will further increase the momentum for teachers to use AI in their administration and planning, if not in their classroom practice. This presentation will explore how we might begin to use generative AI in the classroom. It will only touch on a few of the many potential uses. Some of these are listed in my blog, which is www.neilingram.co.uk. In these demonstrations I will use a number of different free generative AI tools. I'm working on the assumption that many teachers, if not most teachers, will use the free versions of Microsoft Copilot or Google Gemini, depending on whether their schools use Microsoft or Google products. There are other useful generative tools too, such as ChatGPT, which is now bundled with some Apple machines, and Claude. One of the key ideas in lesson planning is to work out what the students should already know about a topic before you actually start teaching. So I'm going to model this using respiration at GCSE biology, because there are considerable overlaps between that and what should be taught at the earlier key stage 3. The screen shows Microsoft Edge, the browser, with Microsoft Copilot added as an extension. Into the browser I have loaded the Science National Curriculum for Key Stage 3, and I am asking a question in the Copilot box which says, "You are an expert in biology teaching in English schools." The document is the Key Stage 3 National Curriculum. It lists what students need to know before they start their GCSE courses aged 15. Use the document to tell me what students need to know and understand before they study respiration at GCSE. It's a good idea, I think, when you start a system prompt like this, to tell the AI what you expect them to be, what role you want them to play, Certainly people that use ChatGPT thought that that was valuable, and Copilot is based on ChatGPT models. So you're an expert in biology teaching in English schools, locates the learning that you want the Copilot to access. I've then described what the Key Stage 3 curriculum is, although I expect it knows it already, and then I tell it what I actually want them to be able to do. And this is what happens when we press send on the Copilot browser. Copilot has returned a thorough and detailed analysis of the Key Stage 3 syllabus and highlights the key things that you would expect students to know before they study respiration at GCSE. This is of real value. Not all of this will necessarily be relevant to your particular GCSE teaching, but nonetheless it's good to be reminded of this at this early stage of planning. At this point, Copilot has already read the Key Stage 3 programme of study for biology and has it loaded into its system. So the next stage is we can ask it to compare the GCSE syllabus from the AQA specification directly with the national curriculum. So the prompt on the right is designed to get Copilot to compare the GCSE specification on the left with the Key Stage 3 programme of study. And these are the results that it's produced. It looks at those parts of the two documents which are similar and those parts which are different. And it's stressing what has to be done at GCSE that's not been taught at Key Stage 3, which allows you to build a lesson on what the students already know and progress them further into GCSE levels of understanding. Now we can move forward and produce a quiz to help students to recall the previously learned ideas from Key Stage 3. Excellent, thank you. Please write a 10-question quiz testing the ideas that you drew from the Key Stage 3 document. Make these into multiple choice questions with 4 alternatives, only one of which is correct. Make the prompt as detailed as possible, and that will then save you time in having to go through the process to get what you actually want. Here are the questions that it's produced. Notice that there are no answers provided because we didn't ask for them. The more specific the queries, the better the quality of the answers produced. Even so, you still need to check that the questions are relevant to your students. Question 4, for example, where it uses ribosomes as an alternative, may not be a term that your students know. Homeostasis is a more synoptic topic than respiration, drawing on an understanding of how the different body systems work together. Can we use Copilot to investigate the integrative nature of this topic? It certainly does detect this, and the list of possible topics to draw from is really quite long. Cells and organisation, the human body, the respiratory system, digestive system, the excretory systems, nutrition, diet, enzymes, photosynthesis, energy transfer. Really, almost the whole of Key Stage 3 biology is being drawn into this, which is what you would expect because homeostasis is by definition a synoptic topic. Of course, you as a teacher will know which examples you want to teach at GCSE and can therefore hone this down into only those parts that are relevant to your upcoming lessons. It's possible to use AI to add some interactivity to quizzes. In particular, I used Claude for this because I couldn't get Micro Copilot to generate the necessary code. Claude generates the HTML code for the whole of the quiz and writes the questions as well. You copy the code and paste it into a plain text editor such as Notepad or TextEdit, and you must make sure that you save the work in plain text format. If you save it in rich text format, then it will not work. You save the file with the name .html, and then you can load it into a browser and you will find that it loads as a web page. The formatting of this quiz is very rudimentary, but it's possible to make it more sophisticated by adapting the prompts at the beginning. The idea is that when you click on an answer, it turns blue, and you can check your answers at the end to see which ones are right. It doesn't actually give you what the correct answer is, but again you can add that at the prompt stage. At some point Microsoft Copilot is going to be added into forms, and it would be possible to get Copilot to generate this form into an MS form and create a spreadsheet and a link to send it out to students. This would complete the process for you. But I suspect that when that happens, that's going to be part of the premium features of Microsoft, which will have to be paid for separately. So let's see if Copilot can produce a workable lesson plan from these instructions. Microsoft Copilot is able to develop a reasonable lesson plan for a model lesson. Doubtless it could be improved by developing each activity further, and that will require instructing the AI further in different rounds of questions and answers. I see this as the pedagogical equivalent of a ready meal, ready in moments and perfectly okay, but not something you'd want to rely on every day. However, if you were to spend some time working with the AI by asking it further questions, by critiquing what it's doing, and by really thinking about the plan, then I think it would be perfectly possible to work together to produce something which is a very useful lesson indeed that could be used routinely with a class. It has potential, but you have to know how to use it successfully, I think. So let's do that by asking further rounds of questions. Explain the concept of renewable energy suitable for a class of Year 7 students. This is a perfectly reasonable explanation of the concept of renewable energy for this age group. You can have repeated conversations on the same topic with AI until you get exactly what you're looking at. For example, is nuclear power a renewable energy source? Is a question that is often asked at this level. The answer is perfectly good, but it doesn't mention things like safety risks. So if you wanted to include that, you'd have to go back and get it to include it in its answers. In the lesson plan, it suggested finding an engaging video clip about renewable energy. So I asked it to find me one on YouTube, and it's recommended one by National Geographic, which certainly does seem to fit the bill. I was interested to know whether it could produce a transcript of the video, and as you can see, it's declined to do this because of copyright restrictions. But it has given a summary of the content which actually does reflect what's in the film. I've asked it to produce a list of the benefits of renewable energy, and it's been able to do that. So I need an end of lesson quiz based on the content of the lesson. So I've asked it to produce an 8-question multiple choice retrieval question based on the form that we had before. I've said each question should have 4 possible answers, and this time I've asked it to indicate the correct answer. I've shown a few of the questions on the left hand side, and you can see that the answers are next to the question. It would be possible to ask it to put the answers in a box at the end of the quiz. Of course, it's possible to get this quiz translated into any language, so to show this I've translated it into French. But the ability to translate materials into multiple languages seems to be a huge strength and asset of this kind of technology. AI is renowned for being able to simplify text for target audiences. So I'm going to show it some text, and I'm going to ask it to make it into a form that's suitable for an 11-year-old student. To be specific, I've said that no sentence should have more than 30 syllables and explain technical terms in italics. The text I wanted it to simplify is on the left, and the answer, the output, is on the right. A long time ago, there was a common ancestor for both humans and ammonites. Superficially, it looks very good, but it doesn't really explain what a common ancestor for humans and ammonites is. So I think I would have to go back and get it to explain this as part of that simplified text. Of course, what it's very good at is producing images, and so the image of the ammonite on the left is produced using Copilot. How good is AI at answering GCSE Key Stage 3 examination questions? The question on the right is looking at the effective temperature on the height of bread dough at two different temperatures, 5 degrees and 35 degrees. And you can upload it into either Copilot or Claude as an image file, a .png. So I asked Claude to analyse the results, and the results are on the right, and you can see that it's produced really quite a detailed comparison of all of the different facets of the data. The question goes on to ask about a graph of the results. I tried this with Copilot, I tried this with Claude on a MacBook, Gemini on a MacBook, and Claude on an iOS iPad. And Claude on the iOS iPad was the only one that was able to take the data and plot the graph. And here is a film of the process. Watching it, I'm reminded of the famous Arthur C. Clarke quote from 1973, that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. For me, this is close to magic. This is a screenshot of the graph that it produced, and you can see that it's given the graph a title. You could, by refining the initial prompt, get Claude to draw curves of best fit rather than straight lines, and I think that probably would be an improvement. So finally, how does Claude cope with a more open-ended 4-mark question? This is one from an AQA paper of a GCSE, and you can see there's a lot of information in this question about an allergy that is produced by a chemical called FeLD1. And Claude has got to read through all of that and then use it to explain how the cat has been produced using selective breeding. And this is exactly the process through which the students have to go when they answer this question. Now, I tried this with Copilot and I tried it with Claude. I give you the result from Claude here because it's given more specific results than Copilot, but you can see Claude has been able to pick up the idea about FELD1 and uses as a basis for producing an answer which is to do with selective breeding of cats. And this is a really very good answer to the question. So the question one asks at the end of all of this demonstration is, what are the advantages of using generative AI to plan and develop biology lessons? Are there advantages and are there downsides? I think the advantages are that it can help teachers to focus their attention on key aspects of lesson planning by automating some of the more mechanical and repetitive tasks. The disadvantage comes when it becomes as a substitute for teacher thinking, like a ready meal, because the teacher has not mastered the brief or understood the topic before they attempt to teach the lesson. To illustrate this, I want to distinguish two types of student teacher. The first is mindful when lesson planning. They ask questions, they improve the prompts, they're not satisfied with the answers until it fits what they want. Teachers like this, and I've trained many of them, spend an enormous amount of time lesson planning because they find it very hard to stop. They find it difficult to know when they've produced a good enough answer. I used to say to them that 70% is good enough. And for those mindful teachers, I think AI could be a real benefit by allowing them to ask AI probing questions, and that could speed up the time spent researching and agreeing a lesson plan. The other kind of teacher is what I describe as mindless teachers. They grab an instant lesson plan because they're not organised, and they use it without really thinking about the lesson that they're teaching. AI could easily save their bacon on many occasions, but it won't necessarily improve their teaching unless they really understand the lesson topic and the way in which AI is suggesting that it's taught. AI is like fast food, quick and convenient, but you can't live healthily on fast food every day. And it's only mindful teachers that will be critical and reflective enough to grow in their understanding of the topic or of the lesson pedagogy. But I think it's clear now that it's a responsibility for all teachers to get their heads around how and when and whether they should use AI in their lesson planning. And I'd like to point you towards a group called AI in Education, aiineducation.co.uk, which is a group of teachers, schools administrators and academics who have come together to learn how to use AI in lessons and in the classroom. And as a group, this is definitely worth getting to know. They have a website and they also host conferences. An Ofcom survey last year found that Snapchat's chat box called My AI was being used by 72% of 13 to 17-year-olds. Young people are already using AI, and this has sparked quite reasonable concerns about whether it's being used by pupils to cheat when they're doing homework or coursework. And I think it's very important that students in schools, just as student teachers, can learn how to use AI mindfully too. And they can only learn this in lessons under the guidance of human teachers. And we need to move to thinking about how we might integrate these technologies into our routine classroom practices. And this is something that I've been trying to explore in some detail on my blog, neilingrum.co.uk. I've developed a possible way of using AI in the classroom called Pedagogy AI. Pedagogy AI is a roadmap that outlines how you might use this at the different phases of a lesson. Pedagogy AI is based on research that I conducted in schools that were successfully using iPads in their lessons. And you can find out more on a series of blog posts on the blog at neilingram.co.uk.